I'm very vocal about my love for the Champaign-Urbana music scene, and I think there's definitely something unique here.
This is Champaign is Also a Band podcast. One songwriter, one song. I'm Sven, your host for a journey into the music of Champaign-Urbana. Recorded in the Blue Box studio with a songwriter from the Champaign-Urbana music scene, past or present. Champaign is Also a Band podcast is a member of the Champaign Showers Podcast Network. Welcome to Champaign is Also a Band podcast. Today, my guest is someone you may know as Clockwork Owl. We're going to be listening to her song, Platos Cave, which we just recorded in the studio, and I'm really excited to share that with everyone, and I hope that she is as well. Anka?
Yep.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I guess without further ado, as I love to say, let's listen to the song.
Raised in a large golden cage with bars that glittered. I could never touch the sides. Fed the world on a platter. What's outside doesn't matter. Just keep your horizons wide. Forced to have my handheld a Pavlovian bell. Just parrot back all I'd ever known. Kool-Aid from a sippy cup till the day I grew up and I started learning life on my own. Well, it's never easy to clear out a flood, to then watch a hard rain fall. And I may not be thrilled with the hand I've been dealt, but I'm lucky I have cards at all. Sold as a hotel, stay with us and you can pick any door. But the big man, he fumbled the illusion, it crumbled and I caught a glimpse of something more. Look beyond the bars, saw the world at large, the one I'd known so long now looked paper thin. But there's impossible tension between my being in this new dimension, so I took to shedding my old skin. Well, it's never easy to clear out a flood, to then watch a hard rain fall. And I may not be thrilled with the hand I've been dealt, but man, I'm lucky I have cards at all. Strong and I did know how to play in a way that I could win. But in the pouring rain one night I met a seasoned gambler and he kindly took me in. Laid down the rules, taught me all he knew. Try to keep your deuces wild but have an ace up your sleeve, 'cause every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser were the final words he ever said to me. And it wasn't easy to clear out a flood after seeing how hard rain could fall. But once I learned how to play the game, I found my hand weren't so bad after all. On my ivory collar, for not much more than $1, give up the safety net that so many crave. And though it may have been adorned with crystalline thorns, a cage is still a cage. How can I defend a choice they can't comprehend when it's theirs I'm trying to disavow? And so I fear that the cost will be the ones I loved and lost, but I'm a stranger to them now.
All right, welcome back. So, as is my favorite question to always ask, what came first, the words or the music?
Definitely the words.
Definitely the words.
Most of the time it's the words for me.
So what, I guess, brought out the words in this? Do you remember the particular time when it just kind of came to you doing the words or writing the words?
So I know that the first thing that came to me in this song was the line, "I'm lucky I have cards at all." The line before that, I may not be happy with the hand I've been dealt, but like that came right after. And I kind of built the song around that. That was in my head for a few days. The rest of it is pretty much based on a few conversations I was having with different people during that period.
I know that when we first talked about doing this, you had a different title for this piece, but then you decided on Plato's Cave. Is there a particular reason that you felt that was necessary to change the title?
So the initial title was Dissatisfaction, and ironically I was dissatisfied with that title. It felt a little off, even though it is what the song was about. I think Plato's Cave just fits, like, it's a good summary of, I think, the themes that this song captures, and it felt like a right fit.
Are you particularly interested in philosophy, or is that something that you're into as philosophy?
I don't think I'm interested in it as such, like, as I don't read a lot of philosophy or anything like that, but philosophical concepts come up that I find interesting. I do like rabbit hole a little sometimes and like see what they're about, and like I do like incorporating them into my understanding of the world,
right? But
I don't actively go out and look for them as much.
Well, and it's interesting when you say that it informs how you view the world, that Plato's Cave is an illustration of how someone views the world, and that, you know, what we think we perceive is not actually the thing that we perceive. It's just shadows of... Maybe
my understanding of Plato's Cave is a little different from the one you just said, because and I guess, see, that's what I like about it. It can be like philosophical analogies almost can be applied to so many different things. I think I get this from my mom, but I like using analogies to explain what I'm thinking. What you were saying about Plato's Cave right now was how it was supposed to be a metaphor for what we perceive may not be what the world is. What I kind of knew it as was, so I don't know if you meant it in the way of humans in general. There's a filter between what's happening in the real world and what we are able to process. But what I kind of always thought was that it's when you're raised in a certain way, almost indoctrinated, but not that intensely, and people see outside of that, almost like, you know, with cults, for example, like when people see what it's like outside of that and try to go back and be like, no, this is what it actually is. That's like just the eye-opening experience of leaving something that you thought your life, that was your worldview, getting shaken. That's kind of always how I perceived it.
It's this idea of what we thought it was isn't what it really is, or that what we saw were just not the real thing to begin with. But you're lucky that you have cards at all. How did that flow from this idea of your perception of the world and having cards dealt to flow back to these images of being raised in a large golden cage.
So there's two themes here, almost, where one of them is the golden cage. So I was saying conversations I was having at the time was basically with people who grew up a lot like I did, where it's a very privileged upbringing that we had, but there were restrictions. And I'm trying not to go deep into that. I was nervous about making this my song because there are some like really personal threads, but I was like, I'm just not going to point out which ones apply to me. So people have to guess which ones are about me and which ones are about people I was talking to.
And I can't say that I won't just stumble upon those because, I'm inquisitive.
I'm going to deflect anything I don't want to answer. So
or you could just say, I don't want to talk about, seriously, it's fine because we want it to be the best for everybody and a good story. So one of the things that came about was when you originally told me about the song and sent me the lyrics, when we were going to come and record, you said, I changed some words. So how did that come about? And one of the line is, held in a cell, sold as a hotel, stay with us and you can pick any door.
Yeah.
Well, let's just at least talk about why you felt it was important to swap that out or put that in.
That's an observed effect, so I'm cool talking about it. The culture I grew up in, especially my parents are very classic Asian parents as well. That refers to the idea of you can only be a doctor, lawyer, and engineer, kind of. It does mean more than that, but that's the plurality of what it refers to, if that makes sense. And it's just the fact that these are the three career options that'll get you like whatever you want, but that whatever you want is so two-dimensional because it only pretty much guarantees you quote-unquote successful career, which a lot of people I was speaking to are like, that's not what success means to me. So that's what that means in the whole held in a cell, sold as a hotel, is kind of just how I see that in my head, where it's trapping you into these options, but, hotels with all their doors, and you think of it as like a getaway and just an escape, and positive force. And, I was talking about analogies. That's how I see that in my head. The cell kind of refers to being given these options, like discrete number of options. Sold as a hotel is that they're trying to sell it to you as this is giving you everything. And then stay with us sounds like something a hotel would say, and you can pick any door, any room, but it's only this limited number of options.
Right, you're stuck in the hotel.
Yeah.
Right? This California.
You can check out anytime you like. To answer your question, that was, I thought, a more succinct explanation of it than the original lyrics were.
When you said it's never easy to clear out a flood, to watch a hard rainfall, where did that image particularly pop into your head? The idea of that it's hard to clear out a flood.
I think those lines just came to me without an image. I think my brain just went, write that down. So I did. It came to me in the same kind of tune as the other lines in the chorus. So I was like, I guess those go together. And then they kind of made sense to me, at least, together. So I was like, cool, I'm keeping that. This song mostly is written from, and this is a departure from what I'm usually used to, but I wasn't directly writing for me for this one. It was not a character, but like I was outside of my, like, the I is an entity that isn't complete. So that was unusual for me because I usually write very, very true to my own experiences.
This is kind of a conglomeration of stories that make one image altogether.
Yeah, and there's so many different themes. Like that whole like Asian raising thing is like one of the threads of the song, but there's so many parallel ideas that came to that like have the same theme of being limited by something and wanting to stretch beyond that. The hotel part specifically, I feel, was more to do with the careers thing, but like it was a coincidence that I was having so many conversations at the same time about you're being limited by something, but you can see beyond that, and trying to kind of marry the two concepts of what you're used to and this other thing you can see. And that's how Plato's Cave comes back in, you know, because it's like the limitations of seeing shadows on the wall and then seeing that there's more beyond that and dealing with that shock.
I'll back up to maybe more of my interpretation, which I feel like is, since we've already started talking about this, it seems in line, but who knows? I can be surprised sometimes. But I feel like all of these, one word that I don't feel that you've used so far to describe this song or the concepts are it's like trapped. I felt like all of these concepts, and this is just, as I said, this is my interpretation before, and then even after we've talked a little bit, do you feel that that's not the overall concept? Like, because I know there are some spots where it's, you know, reaching out or trying to reach out, so not necessarily completely trapped, but it made me feel, there was a lot of things in here that made me feel like concepts of being trapped and then seeking hope or seeking something new, but I don't know if you feel like addressing that.
There's the themes of like feeling trapped, I think, are pretty prevalent throughout the song.
I guess going back to that, to clear out a flood, well, I guess other than being buried alive, I can't really think of anything worse in terms of feeling helpless as being just completely covered by water and flooded over, where there's reach up, reach down, there's nothing more than just water. I don't know if that's
the flood I have, because I have images after writing. Like when I wrote those lines, they weren't images, but I have them now, and it isn't that kind of overwhelming flooding that I picture. Those two lines specifically are more of a basement flood that I'm imagining.
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
Where it's like sweeping up the remnants of like this previous worldview that you had, just cleaning up things that are wrong in your life, and then the hard rain that falls immediately afterwards. And that kind of comes from my own life, where I kind of figured something out and then was hit by this life-changing thing. And it's basically just saying it's annoying that you deal with this and then the same thing kind of comes up again.
I think it's interesting that this song has a certain level of being, you know, sheltered, trapped, what have you, but they're also, from some of the things that you've been saying, I feel like there's a little bit of blame too, like almost I should have known better, but you were sheltered. But like, I don't know, it just, some of the things that you just said there, like, I don't feel that it, I don't know, I feel bad to have that thought of, I don't know, whenever I run into something, and I always personalize it coming back as a reflection, but I can't think of worse things that we do to ourselves than saying I should have known better, when really sometimes things just aren't our fault. And I just thought, I feel that in this song with it's like the trap idea, but also feeling, I don't know, I always have a hard time like articulating that, but it just like, I don't feel like
That's
it's
why you use analogies.
Yes. Yeah, how can I defend a choice
They can't comprehend. Yeah.
Instead of you.
Instead of
like,
you. Yeah.
So
that was a little more just general, because that came from a conversation with a friend who kind of like, we were just basically talking about how changed so much that like people don't recognize you. Like, this was referring to their family, just doesn't really recognize them anymore, almost, that I'm a stranger to you now. So there's a lot of nature versus nurture. That's another theme of this song, that referred to them coming up to their, like, realizing what their nature was and being like, yeah, that's not how anyone who I grew up with understands the world, and estranged themselves, not necessarily in a bad way, but they just didn't have anything in common with the people they were raised by anymore. And that's kind of what those lines were about.
Another line that I saw that you added was, laid down the rules, taught me all he knew, try to keep your deuces wild, but have an ace up your sleeve. Was that part of a conversation, or?
That wasn't. That was just me continuing the theme of cards from the chorus. And that was a reference to my own life that I'm cool talking about. Basically, just like, I've had the whole experience of seeing this whole world that I didn't know about. And that was more when I stumbled across things that I was interested in that I'd never experienced before. I didn't know where to start with, like, knowing how to do them. And that was just a reference to every, like, mentor. Friends, mostly. But when I say mentor, I just mean someone who, like, showed me the ropes for anything.
Do you have, like, a particular favorite line in this song?
Looked between the bars, saw the world at large. The one I'd known so long now looked paper thin, but there was impossible tension between my being and this new dimension, so I took to shedding my old skin. First off, looked between the bars. I was debating about that for a while because I had Beyond as well, but I wanted to make an Elliot Smith reference because I love him. So that it has nothing to do with between the bars, but I wanted to put that in there. Those are basically lines that describe pretty much as well as I possibly could the way I felt at a certain point, because in my late teens, a bunch of things just happened to me at once that kind of almost stripped my identity in a way that I kind of just didn't know what was going on anymore. And I basically had to build myself back up from square one and just see what was important to me and, like, rebuild my values and stuff like that. And that's a lot of the nature versus nurture thing coming back, because that was me figuring out my own nature, and, like, that was how it felt, where it did feel like I was seeing, like, my former worldview had been 2D, and it literally felt like a third dimension opened up. It did feel like I was shedding my skin to fit into this new. And I think just because of how well I feel like I summarize, like, I don't know if anyone else is gonna understand it the way I do, but I felt like happy with the way I was able to express, because I'm not good with adjectives to describe how I'm feeling, but I am better with images, and I feel like that explained it back to me in a way that I was like, cool, that is how I felt. So that's probably why those lines are my favorite.
Do you feel that that's, like, your songwriting is kind of this reciprocal thing? By writing your music, you find out more about yourself? Maybe there's things that weren't readily apparent to you, but as you write them out, it's like, oh, that's my, I don't know, not subconscious, but whatever. That teaches me more about myself.
Right, 100%. I feel like that's one of the main ways that I process how I feel. And I'd say my mental health got a lot better once I started writing music, because I was able to, like, in general, I like, even for, like, things I have to do, I like putting things on paper to externalize them, because it helps keep my brain less cluttered. Doing that helped me, like, realize what was going on and, like, try and explain things to myself that I was feeling.
When I write something down, it's like I can get rid of it too.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I can throw it away. I'm like, well, that's, now I've externalized this and now it's gone.
Yeah,
I can exercise this demon, or whatever you want to call it, however you feel about that. For
things like to-do lists, for me, it literally feels like I'm taking that line out of my brain and, like, putting it onto, it feels like if my, like, what I'm picturing right now is that my brain is just a black space with, like, sentences, like white sentences floating around. Writing something down is literally taking one out and putting it on paper. That helps to clear that, like, them bumping against each other, and it just decluttering it, you know? So that's how my brain works. I
know that you just recently released a song, Hey Chicago, and that was in October 16th?
16th. I picked it because it's Flea's birthday.
Is this the first release that you've done?
Yep.
And I know that you mentioned something about maybe talking about that song. Why did you finally decide that Plato's Cave was the song that you wanted to talk about?
I just think it tells a more interesting story. So the people I spoke to about, like, the conversations that brought it up, we had similar upbringings. I feel like for people who've experienced that feeling of, like, not being able to see beyond what they're shown might be able to relate to it. In general, I think the story it tells is just a lot more interesting and more multi-dimensional. I think Hey Chicago is more relatable because it's a love song. I didn't find it as interesting, you know? Like, there are lyrics in it, like, one of my favorite lyrics I've ever written is in it, and, like, it's a song I have a lot of love for, but it's also, like, part of it is that it's kind of expired, and that for that particular person, it's past. Yeah, I'm fond of it. I'm very happy with that song, but I just think that there are more interesting things to talk about than a love song.
And so do you have any plans for recording some more music? And
if I can find time.
Well, yeah, there's always that. But I guess what I'm saying is you have plenty of songs that you'd love to record.
Absolutely.
If you only had the time.
Yeah. I have, like, plans for eventually an album. There's, I think, right now, 8 kind of floating around about the same thing, so I was kind of just gonna lump them all together and put them in an album if I can get them recorded.
Great.
But I have a name for the album and everything, but it's just whether I can make that happen or not.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention about Plato's Cave, or something that you meant to mention earlier and just forgot? Or
one thing that I did just remember that I don't think we quite got to all the themes that are throughout it, but one that I did want to point out was that, like, because there is a lot of reference to wealthy things like a golden cage, and, like, there's things about, like, I think gems or something at the end, and the chorus when it's saying, I may not be thrilled with the hand I've been dealt, but I'm lucky I have cards at all, is something that I've seen is very common among me and my peers. That this is a personal thing as well, where there are elements of things that I'm dissatisfied with, and I'm like, do I have the right to complain about these things because of, like, I mean, I, with respect to my peers, was like, I grew up in, like, the people around me were pretty wealthy, and, like, relatively I wasn't, like, quite there, but we had a very comfortable upbringing. I know the levels of suffering that people can have, and I'm like, do these count as problems, you know? And that's another theme that kind of comes throughout it, and when there's anything like gold or money related or whatever, that is what that's a reference to.
The fact that it contains themes or ideas that are very personal, but also that you're perhaps uncomfortable to talk about, that really speaks to music in general. Somehow I just find it amazing that it's like you're comfortable enough to put those concepts out or these ideas out and perform them. It's fascinating because, you know, we're talking about it as a very therapeutic thing, but it's also the ability to say those things. Even though you're the one singing it, you can sing it anonymously a little bit too, because it's well, you don't know if it's that person, or you don't know if it's, and I can definitely relate to that, being able to just say that thing that you've wanted to say. It's like you can bare your soul, but it's not like you have to put yourself in a bad position for that.
Yeah, that was also something that it was hard for me to start performing original music because of that. Because, I mean, in my lyrics, I hide through metaphor all the time anyway. Like, I did that a lot in this song. And one thing I really admire about some of my favorite songwriters is, some of them who comes to mind is Bob Forrest. He was in a band called Thelonious Monster, which is what he's most famous for. What I know him best for is he was in a band called The Bicycle Thief, and their album You Come and Go Like a Pop Song is probably my it's my go-to answer if someone asks me what my favorite album is.
I mean, even the name is great. I love it.
Right. A lot of songs I think are conversational in a storytelling way, but his songwriting, it sounds like you're sitting down and having a conversation with him. There's just no veil. He doesn't hide anything. He just says how he feels. Like, one of the opening lyrics to one of his songs is, I woke up this morning feeling pretty good, and pretty good is really good to me. That's kind of the bluntness with which he writes, and that's something I admire, because I'm always hiding behind metaphor whenever that stresses me out a little bit. Another of my favorite songwriters, Jon Fratelli from the Fratellis, their most recent album, there's a song called Laughing Gas, which is kind of about that and about a bunch of other things, but one of the lines is, nobody else will ever know what you're thinking. It's like, I know what my lyrics mean to me, so I'm always thinking like, oh, everyone's gonna know, it's so obvious, everyone's gonna know exactly what I'm talking about, but you don't.
Champaign is also a band podcast is proud to support Jubilee Cafe. Jubilee Cafe is a free weekly meal program at Community United Church of Christ, 805 South 6th Street in Champaign, Illinois. Jubilee Cafe serves a home-cooked meal from 5 to 6:30 each Monday. Their mission is to feed hungry people by cooking healthy, delicious meals and by serving their guests restaurant-style with servers waiting on tables. Jubilee Cafe is open to anyone who cares to eat with them. Because food insecurity among students is so high, they serve students as well as others in and around the Champaign-Urbana community who struggle with hunger. Meals are free to all and will be served each Monday evening, located in the accessible lower level of the building at 6th and Daniel Streets in Champaign. For more information on the meal or how to volunteer, go to the Jubilee Cafe CUCC Facebook page or email them at jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. That's jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. So, how long have you been in the Champaign-Urbana area?
I moved here in 2015, fall of 2015. Right. I'd say I only really became involved in the music scene in late, like December-ish, probably of 2016. I used to run an open mic on campus at the Union. So that was my little exposure to the scene, was through that. I met a couple people through there, and there was a band called Ocean Glass, and they were, for a while, really the only knowledge I had of the scene, but I didn't know how far it spreads until late 2016.
When did you start going out and performing personally?
I was playing at those open mics that I ran.
Okay.
I think my first ever show was January of 2017 in Chicago. A friend of mine, there was a spot on a bill that he was playing, and he was like, hey, do you want to pick it up? That was around the time I also was introduced to like the house show scene, so that was how I started getting that picked up. And
when I first heard of Clockwork Owl, you were on a bill with Motes.
Yeah.
Here, and the name stood out. I guess I didn't know what to expect your sound would be, and you didn't necessarily have much recorded, so I was like, I wonder what that's going to be like. Where did the name Clockwork Owl come from?
The name was initially just a bunch of words that I liked that I wrote down, and I was like stringing them together, being like, does this sound good? Does this sound good? For the longest time since I was a kid, I was like, if I ever have a band, I'm gonna call it the Dawn Patrol, which I still wish was my name, but I looked it up before like deciding on anything to see if anyone else had it first. There's this like fairly well-known wedding band in Scotland called the Dawn Patrol, and I'm like, why? And then
DAWN, right?
Yeah.
So you grew up in Hong Kong and moved here
for college.
Maybe this is too broad since it's such a large city. Was there a music scene in Hong Kong that you were aware of, or?
If there was, it was all Cantonese music. So, but as far as I'm aware, there really isn't a DIY scene or anything like this there. For starters, would not be feasible because it's all apartments. Everything's up in the air. There's no space for anything like this. So this was a very big change for me.
Did that seem so foreign that the DIY scene like existed, that it was like that people had these in their houses, and like that it would just be this kind of underground kind of thing, sometimes literally.
Yeah.
You know?
The whole thing was new for me at once, and the thing is, I don't quite know, because this is the only place I've ever really lived that isn't Hong Kong. I wasn't sure if it was unique to Champaign-Urbana or to places where there's space to do this kind of thing and people who want to. And I definitely think I'm very vocal about my love for the Champaign-Urbana music scene, and I think there's definitely something unique here, because I mean, I know little bits about other places now that I've looked into them a little more. Like, I know that DIY scenes exist, and it might just be because I've only lived here and I've only experienced this, but I feel like there's something really unique about this one.
So do you have a favorite venue that you like to go see people at, or that you've performed at that you really liked?
If we're allowed to use ones that have passed, I would say, a current favorite of one that still exists, I really like Waluigi's Mansion. A special place in my heart is always going to be Audible Meats, because that was the first place that introduced me to the CU music scene. I think the first house show I ever played was in that basement. I think the first house show I ever went to was in that basement. That basement was just a kind of almost safe haven for me, that whenever I went and hung out with them, I was like, I'm at peace, I'm happy, I'm surrounded by people that I feel really comfortable with, and that whole house just has a lot of meaning to me. So I'd say that one. So
is there a non-DIY venue that you like?
Does the IMC count as DIY, or does it not?
It skirts that very fine line of both an amazing public venue and then also just kind of DIY just by methodology.
Yeah, because I think a space like the IMC is just a gift to any community, especially an artsy one like Urbana. I do love the Rose Bowl. I think it's a great summary of the love in Urbana in general, because like it's so tight-knit in there, and I'd say most people there, at least the ones I've interacted with, it's usually just full of people who are part of the art scene. It's just a great little like hub.
And you do get the sense that the people that run the Rose Bowl really care about music.
I love what the new owners are doing with it. I think they've been really good for the Rose Bowl, because I remember the second or third time I went, I was talking to Sam Payne, and he was like, yeah, we own it now. And I was like, what is going on? So I didn't get to see it that much before. I got enough of a sense of it to kind of see the, I don't want to say shift, because it wasn't a shift, but growth.
New energy, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It was already a really nice venue. I don't know who the old owners were, and I don't know how integrated they were with the Rose Bowl, like, patrons, but the fact that, like, Sam, Marty, and Charlie were always there anyway, they're just doing exactly what they want it to be and what everyone wants it to be, and I just think the Rose Bowl is it's a gem of the Urbana community.
So do you have a favorite CU band or artist?
I'm currently mid-adjusting. I have this playlist. I'm so proud of the name. It's called Shambana Fambana. It's basically just all the people on the scene that I've either met, like either people who are local or people I've played house shows with who are touring, and it's just a playlist of one song of each. I'm like redoing it right now, but it's just my favorite song of people in the community, and there's like 35 artists on it right now, I think, and I don't want to think through all of that and be like pick a favorite. No.
I get that.
One thing, I was actually thinking about this recently, just about the scene in general, or actually I started thinking about it. So I was listening to an interview with, I don't know if you know who Mark Lanegan is. He is the vocalist of the Screaming Trees. He has, in my opinion, the greatest male voice ever. So I was watching a podcast interview with him, and he was kind of talking about the scene growing up in Seattle when the Screaming Trees and like bands like Nirvana were like Alice in Chains, and kind of just talking about how they were coming up. Something he said, it reminded me of me reading rock star autobiographies when I was a kid, and just it was about that music community, you know, and like just going to shows and to see this band of a friend of yours, and like just people just having a conversation, like, you know, this person from this band, and, you know, just running into people on the street that, you know, from music and the scene. And like as a kid, I always thought that was so fascinating. And then I realized a few days ago that I'm living that right now in Champaign-Urbana, and like I'm sure it exists in big cities, obviously, like LA, Seattle, things like that. I kind of just never thought that I would be a part of something like that, because a lot of the time he was talking about it, they weren't big yet. You know, they were just a community of musicians, like, supporting each other. And, like, a lot of the conversations they talk about, I have parallels here. And that was a really nice moment for me, where I was like, hey, this thing I looked up to and dreamed about as a kid, I have that right here. And that's something that C has given me, you know? And, like, it was a moment. It was very nice. We do have such a rich community of talent in so many ways. And like another thing I do find unique about Champaign-Urbana and our music scene is that like a lot of us are students, and that does add a weird element to it. The fact that there's just this dual life that so many of us have is something that's unique.
That's such a good point. Just that it is unique, and there's nothing really like it.
I have a lot of love for the CU music scene. Every time I actually try to vocalize it, this is something I don't think I can explain using analogies. I force the music scene on people, and I'm like, look, it's such a, like, it's almost like a parallel universe, you know? Like, I think the biggest mistake students at the university make is not branching out, and like it's not at their fault, because it's kind of hard to find a way in if they don't have one, but like it is almost like a parallel universe, and it's like I just want people to know about it and experience it, you know what I mean? It might not mean as much to them as it does to me, because I have that whole, like, I'm part of the community, like I was saying, the whole Mark Lanegan thing. It's still like, even as someone who, I don't want to say outsider because that sounds wrong, but as someone who's not like involved in the thread of it, I still think it's a great thing to be able to see, and I'm like, look, you should check this out before you go wherever you're going, because you're not gonna see something like this again. And there's just so much diversity in the music itself. There's acoustic stuff, there's like bands, there's the whole hip-hop scene, there's so much variety.
Champaign is Also a Band podcast is proud to support Exile on Main Street. Exile on Main Street, located in the old train station building at 100 North Chestnut Street in downtown Champaign, has been helping to build record collections since 2004. Carrying a wide array of new and used LPs, CDs, and video games. Exile on Main Street has something for just about any music enthusiast and old-school gaming devotee. Exile also hosts regular free live music shows on its stage, so be sure to check out their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for the up-to-date details on the next upcoming event. Open 7 days a week, they can be reached by phone at 217-398-MAIN. That's 217-398-6246. Anka, what is your favorite non-musical thing?
I don't like this question.
Okay.
It's like, I'll try to answer it, but it's just way too broad, you know, because it's like, what is your favorite thing at all, apart from the one thing that would be your go-to answer for what is your favorite? Because like, if someone asked me what's your favorite thing, I'd probably say music, but you're like, apart from music, what's your favorite thing?
I could go first if that would help.
Sure.
Oh, being lazy. Being
Okay.
lazy is my... Oh, I love it. It's my favorite thing. Okay, you heard it here first. Well, or second. Or whatever episode. You heard it 29th here, folks. So...
Do I have to pick one?
No,
Okay.
Go for it.
I mean, okay, so, I mentioned too that I'm studying robotics, and I do enjoy that. So, that's a big part of my life right now. And I'd say, yeah, that stuff is something I find really interesting. I really like the outdoors, being outside, nature, all of that.
Where's your favorite nature place in Champaign-Urbana?
I don't have a car or anything, so I haven't explored CU as much, but whenever I go on runs, I do like going down to the Arboretum, which is my problem is that it's not a good place to go for a run because I just start wandering, or like I get distracted by everything. I don't know, a few weeks ago, as part of a trip, I went to see a snake migration, which was pretty cool.
So you just watch a ton of snakes just kind of slither?
That was what we expected, but it was more of you need to keep an eye out for them and it'll just be one like slithering. But it wasn't like a big group of snakes at once, but it was really cool.
Were they in like a V? No, like geese. I was trying to be like geese.
That would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
But,
they're in V formation. Yes.
But no, just anything outdoor, like outdoor sports in general. So like anything like hiking related. It's just anything that'll let me be outdoors.
Yeah. Well, thanks for spending your afternoon indoors today.
On such a nice day as well.
I know. Yeah. But, it had to happen. I was glad to have you on the show and everything. So we've got robotics, we've got nature. Anything else?
Are abstract concepts allowed?
Yeah. Unless you mean abstract concepts are your favorite thing. Okay.
I was going to say whimsy, just in general. Yeah.
Huh.
Anything whimsical makes me really happy. Things like fairy tales and all of that always fascinated me as a kid. Monty Python, the Muppets, it's just anything that brings in Robin Williams, just that kind of childlike non-caring is how I try to approach life. The last thing that came into my head that I like that's not music is satire. I spend way too much time reading The Onion. I think I spent like an hour this morning just looking at Onion stuff. The Onion, I would say. I currently, just because of the state of the world right now, where I'm trying to focus on my studies, I try to avoid the news. So The Onion is my main, not source of news, but that's the news source I see the most, because I'm like, I can deal with this. You can kind of have a vague sense of what's going on, maybe.
Yes.
Like if you hear about something that happens, it's like it doesn't sound unfamiliar. The actual information you got is a little distorted because it was through The Onion. But
I have to admit that there's been a few times where somebody will mention something and I'm like, oh, that's what The Onion was making fun of.
That's definitely happened to me.
Yes. Anka, thank you so much for coming out, being on the show, and coming and recording your song, Platos Cave. I really appreciate your view of the Champaign-Urbana music scene. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me on. Thank you for listening to Champaign is Also a Band podcast. This is Clockwork Owl reminding you great music is out there. Go find it where you live.
You almost have an NPR voice. It's so good.
Studio, South Beaker, on the inside.